What's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel, and I am so excited. I've got a special guest that is joining me today to dive into a topic that I know you guys are going to be really interested in. This is Dr. Haymeyer. She has all the degrees. She is a licensed dietitian, nutritionist. She's a certified nutritionist specialist. She earned her Master's of Science in Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine from the University of Western States. She has a doctorate in chiropractic medicine. She knows her stuff. So I'm so excited to have her on the channel today. And we're actually, if you guys know me, you follow me, I'm pretty heavy in the macro space, macronutrients, talking about calories and balancing out your protein and all of that. And I think people tend to see pretty good results when they dive into that kind of macro approach. But there's always people that where your macros are super dialed in, you feel like you're doing the work, but yet you're not seeing the results. And that's what Dr. Haymeyer is really going to focus on today. Specifically, is your gut microbiome impacting your overall metabolic function? So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
Yeah, so excited. So I think that gut health is definitely like a hot topic right now. Lots of people are talking about inflammation and cortisol and gut health. And it can feel really overwhelming. So I'm excited for you to kind of help break it down, why gut health is so important and how it's potentially negatively impacting our metabolic rate.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love that the world is starting to turn its attention to the gut and to the microbiome because as you know, there is so much there. There's so many points of leverage, so many opportunities to support our health, to support our metabolism, to promote the vitality that we all really are here for.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So yeah, and diving into, the microbiome and its impact on metabolism, to me, there's so many things, first of all, let's just start with how would I know? How would I know? A lot of times, how would I know there's something going on with my microbiome? A lot of times people think they would know there's something going on with their microbiome if they had digestive symptoms, right? Whether that's bloating or constipation or diarrhea or abdominal pain of sorts. And while certainly those are cues that there is something going on with your microbiome, for some people, it's really like a silent disruption. In other words, those traditional symptoms are not present. And instead, what's present for them is something like difficulty losing weight or brain fog or cholesterol numbers that just don't seem to really add up, heart health numbers, even something around diabetes or pre-diabetes. All of these things can be a tip that there is something going on with your microbiome that needs some tending to.
Yeah, and let break it down. Like, what is the microbiome?
Yeah, such a great, yeah, let's start there. Good
Yeah.
question. So the microbiome is the bugs that live in you and on you. And by bugs, I mean mostly bacteria. Most of our microbiome is comprised of bacteria. However, there might be some viruses, there might be some fungi, a little bit of yeast is normal, and yeast are a type of fungi. And for some people, it might be parasites. So, really, it's any of these microbes that are living in us and on us. Now, most of our microbiome lives in our large intestines, right? And another name for our large intestines is our colon. Those are the same place, just two different names for the same place in our body. So, most of our microbiome lives there, about 80% of it. But we do have some natural microbiome occurring other places in our genitalia, in our mouth, on our skin, so bacteria and other beneficial bugs do exist elsewhere, but most of them live in our large intestines. Now, for some people, one thing that can happen in the way, and that might show up as digestive symptoms in particular, is those microbes that are supposed to live in your large intestines or your colon, they quote unquote swim upstream, right? They make their way to the small intestines, and that's what we call small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, otherwise known as SIBO.
Oh,
And commonly, bloating's a common symptom that's associated with SIBO, diarrhea or constipation, one or the other, typically not both, but usually favoring one or the other with bloating. That may be an indication that your microbiome is living someplace it is not intended to live. So, these microbes, they do a lot of different things for us, right? They play a role in our immune system. They help regulate our production of inflammation. They support our production of nutrients. They play a role in our production of neurotransmitters. So we talked about brain fog, but I didn't mention mood, right? That might be another tip, that there's something going on with your microbiome that could use a little bit of attention. So lots of different ways those microbes that are in our gut in particular benefit our health, benefit they play a role in our metabolism, of course. That's what we're going to be diving into more deeply today. And also how we metabolize our carbohydrates. So a lot of different roles those bugs play, and really, when they are flourishing, when the types of microbes are present that we want to be present, and they're present in the optimal amount, it really sets the stage for for health.
everything. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that, I would say most Americans are dealing with some sort of gut dysfunction, just based on our environment, the processed foods that we eat, the things we put on our skins, the medicines we take. Our healthy microbiome is kind of like under attack all day, every day. Is that
Absolutely. So well said, Amanda. Yes, our microbiome is just really taken a hit in the last, kind of 4 decades or so, for all the reasons you just mentioned. And I would throw in there also stress, right? Stress is going to do a number on the good bugs that are there to take care of us. While I am not antibiotics, antibiotics have saved many, many lives and do many wonderful things. But there have been times where, just out of not knowing
overused?
better, yeah,
Yeah.
they've been used in excess. And so that has a negative impact on the microbiome as well. And in fact, when I work with people, one of the questions I ask them is, were you the kiddo that always had ear infections, right? Even if we're talking 50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
60 years ago, I still want to know, because that does set the body up, and the microbiome in particular up, to be at a bit of a disadvantage, right? And
If you were
so
born via C-section, your
yeah,
microbiome is not going to
exactly.
be as beneficial as like a vaginal birth. And, we went through
Yeah.
that period where, it was real in trend to, schedule a C-section. But little things like that can really, impact your gut microbiome in the long run, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And decades later, there people are scratching their head trying to figure out, like, why can't I lose weight, or why do my labs look the way they do, or why do I have these digestive symptoms or brain fog, or all the different things we just talked about. And
So I would love to just particularly talk about how, microbial dysfunction really impacts metabolism. And then, in the end, I want to give all the listeners, like, how do you fix it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So one of the ways that microbial dysfunction affects metabolism is simply by way of inflammation, right? If there are bugs present that shouldn't be, right? Parasites or fungus in large amounts, or, quote unquote, bad bacteria, any of these guys, if they're present, they're going to drive the inflammatory response. Now, that inflammatory response might be localized, in other words, really just happening in the gut, But more often than not, when it's been going on for a long period of time, it's going to make its way to the rest of the body, right? It's going to be a total body, or what we might call a systemic inflammatory response. And it's going to be kind of like the body's going to be on the hamster wheel of inflammation. And, we talk about inflammation like it's a concept, like it's kind of can become a heady thing, but we can actually measure inflammation. And so when I'm working with people and I'm assessing, okay, what's the missing puzzle here, puzzle piece here, right? They're doing all of the right things, right? They're moving their body, they're sleeping, they're fueling their body with nutrient dense foods, pretty consistently. What's going on? I'm going to start to look for underlying physiological causes. So an underlying physiological cause might be elevated inflammation, but then I'm going to go, well, why is that there?
Right.
What's going on? And so oftentimes when we peel that onion one more layer, we find that a disruption of the microbiome is at play, in which case we got to go in there and we got to do some weeding, we have to do some seeding. I know all these things, right? But really it's addressing what is at the source of that inflammation, because when the body is stuck in that chronic inflammatory response, it's going to be put into that energy conservation, aka fat storage mode. And that's really, it's like, trying to run uphill with a ton of bricks on your back. Good luck, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's impossible. And I guess, I think a lot of people, when you talk about, localized inflammation and then it turning into kind of like systemic inflammation, are you referring to like leaky gut? Because I feel like a lot of people are talking about, the breakdown of our, intestinal walls, and I would assume that potentially microbes play a role in that, maybe.
Yeah, definitely microbes play a role in that, and that inflammatory response plays a role in that. And nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies, which is why it's so important to look at all the different contributing factors. I just got off the phone with a woman who I started working with about a month and a half ago, and she hit the ground running with her plan of action a couple of weeks ago, and she feels like a whole new woman. Well, she was saying to me, why is it because I'm replenishing nutrients? Is it because I'm avoiding these food sensitivities? And for her the answer was yes. Right,
Everything.
it's all of those things,
Yeah.
right? It's so when there are nutrient insufficiencies present, that's going to, on a very foundational level, impact the body's ability to maintain those connections between cells. And when those can't be maintained, that's when the leaky gut happens. But inflammation is going to make it all worse.
Yeah.
And so those inflammatory markers, looking at those systemic inflammatory markers like HSCRP, which stands for high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and homocysteine. These are numbers that I'm going to test these on anyone who walks in my virtual front door and is feeling, frustrated with their metabolism.
Yeah. Um, and I just totally lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. So at the end of the day, if you feel, well, actually, what I was going to say is, I think a very important point to point out here is that, again, as a kind of like macro-based dietitian, a lot of people need to realize that this is a micronutrient issue, big time.
Mm-hmm.
This is we are overfed but undernourished. We're getting plenty of calories, we're getting plenty of macros, maybe not enough protein, but that's a whole different story. But we're not getting quality food, in terms of optimizing those micronutrients. And then the food we grow, it does not have the same amount of, micronutrient load as it used to, and kind of all those things. So I would love to just kind of, end by talking about, like, what do you look at? I mean, how do you really, I mean, obviously anyone watching this can check out her website because she does work with clients virtually. So if you feel like you've got a microbiome issue, it would be worth, setting up a call. But what are you looking at? I just had a stool test done, which was really eye-opening, and kind of looking at the balance of, my gut flora and all of that. But yeah, other than like labs and stuff, how are you diagnosing, and then like if there was, one or two kind of like just really broad, treatment options that anyone could implement, what would they be?
Yeah, well, to start with what I'm looking at. So, yes, blood test labs as well as microbial labs. Love that you just had got a deep dive look at your microbiome. For the people who I work with, I always am going to do a 3-day microbiome test, also lovingly known as a 3-day poop test, right? It's just what it sounds like, right? But we
Yeah.
really need those 3 days to rule in or out a parasite. Without those 3 days, that is actually the gold standard that a lot of people ignore. So we want to make sure we're doing that. And we want to make sure we're using a lab that looks at the information in a different way than a standard lab test. So a standard lab analysis of like a stool sample would say, is this bacteria or is this parasite in this sample? Is this bug in this sample? Versus an assessment that says what's in the sample. It's a very different approach. So we learn a lot more from that second approach. And based on that information, coupled with some blood tests, that is really going to inform my way of proceeding. Some of the red flags for me, besides inflammation, that I'm looking for in that microbiome assessment is a specific strain. I'm going to look at all the strains, but one specific strain I'd invite your listeners to do a little bit of poking around on is called Akkermansia. And this Akkermansia is, it is the sweetheart of microbes right now. It's being called like a microbial GLP-1 agonist, like as if
Oh,
it's, yeah. I know, right? Isn't that a great term? Right. So Ozempic alternative, basically, right? But the thing about it is it, when it is low, and it's not low on everyone, it really isn't. So that is one of the reasons why I like to do these tests to figure out what needs to happen. But when it is low, I wouldn't believe it unless I've seen it, the kind of shifts that I see in metabolism, in bringing down inflammation, in talk about like a complete makeover of labs related to diabetes and cardiovascular health, like lipid
wow.
panels. I mean, again, I wouldn't believe it unless I'd seen it. I don't have any affiliation with any of the people who sell the Akkermansia products, but there are a few. There's one called Pendulum, a company called Pendulum makes some, as well as, oh my goodness, is it Metabolic Maintenance? I think they just came out with a cool one that has some green tea extract, that EGCG in there too. So
Right.
that's really nice if someone's, with either of those instances, if they've got something going on with their cholesterol panel or their diabetes. I like that one, that little combo there. But
Let
that's
me
a
ask
great.
you real quick.
Mhm.
Let me interrupt you. Okay, so
Yeah.
the stool testing, you're doing,
Yes.
stool test for 3 days. Um, and your sample may be different, but the sample is so small.
Yes. Yes.
And so it's like, can you really quantify, from such a
I think
small sample?
I
Or
think my sample is different.
okay,
It's
okay.
not that small. I mean, it's not
Well,
that
you're
small.
not
I
like
don't think.
putting like a full,
No,
load
no, you're not
into an
putting a full thing
envelope,
in. Yeah, yeah. But there ends up being 5 different vials collected.
Okay.
There are 2 different companies I go back and forth between. It just depends on the person and what I want to learn, because they each have their strengths. One of them is a company called Doctors Data. The other one's called Genova. Yeah, and so those are the 2 companies I most commonly use. But in either one of those, we're going to get 5 different samples, and we're going to get all kinds of
All
information on
kinds of
how.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. Yeah,
So in addition, and I think parasites are really big right now, everyone's talking about these crazy parasite cleanses. And I mean, how prevalent do you think parasites is? I mean, is it as prevalent as we think it is, or
I hate to be the party pooper, pun intended, but I honestly don't see them that much. I
oh,
really
okay.
don't. I would say I do see them. I definitely see them, and we never know unless we test. So I'm never going to predict someone doesn't have one,
Right.
because if I'd lose that bet at least sometimes. But I would say really of the people who do complete a microbiome assessment, it's about 10 to 15%. It's not that common. There will even be people who I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a parasite for sure. And they don't. But then again, there will be people who I'm thinking SIBO, 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 and then it comes back and I'm like, oh, parasite, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we
Well, that's actually
pass.
good to hear because based on,
Yeah.
social media,
I
everyone's
know.
full of parasites,
It's so true. Yeah, yeah. I've not yet found that to be true. So hopefully it will stay that way.
Yeah. Well, again, and I basically, from what I've learned, and again, I would love for you to, again, just end us with any types of tips just to overall
Yeah.
improve your microbiome. But I think the biggest thing I've learned as I dive into this topic, in terms of, what we can be doing to, weed, seed, feed, all the things you're talking about, build up the good, stomp out the bad, is plant diversity, eating a wide
Absolutely.
variety of fruits, vegetables, grains, colors, all the things. I mean, do you agree?
100%, 100%, right? There are the things I think about it like yes and less. Like, what do we want to be a yes to, and what do we want to be a less to? And all the things you just said, absolutely, we want to be a yes to it, right? That this whole rage about prebiotics. I'm like, they're in your food. Just eat real food,
Right,
right? It's like it's not that fancy. It's fiber, basically,
right.
right? So yes, just like you said, getting a diversity of plants, fruits, vegetables, getting some whole grains, and some of this will be customized based on the body, right? But uh, getting lentils, beans, things like that, those are all the things we want to do to feed and nourish a microbiome that is going to pay dividends in the way of our health. And then there's what we don't want to do, right? We don't want to be giving it a lot of sugar because that's going to lead to bad bugs growing, and those bad bugs then go after our good bugs and stomp on them. We want to be mindful of our total alcohol, right? Doesn't mean we need to completely avoid alcohol, but there is an amount that is, I like to think about 4 drinks a week or so for most women, and maybe 6 or 7 for men. Is where we want to work towards. For some people, that will be, oh, I'm already there. I hardly drink. Fine. For others, that'll feel like a bigger stretch. And to me, what's really important is to meet yourself where you are and just help yourself take the next step. Right? Rome was not built in a day, and it's really easy for us to, pull out the whipping post and beat ourselves up for our insufficiencies. And, if we can instead really focus on, okay, what's the next step I could take and begin to master that, over time, that's going to leave us, moving in an elevating journey.
Yeah, I think we're so focused on what we can't do, and it's like stop focusing on everything you need to cut out and focus on everything
Mm,
you need to add.
yeah,
Do
love
more
that.
of, because if you just
Yes.
add more, then eventually you end up, cutting kind of the bad out. So
Yeah, you crowd it out.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
one of the challenges that we do, and maybe I'll challenge you guys that are watching this and with my clients and my monthly membership, is we have a gut health month, and basically our challenge is to consume 30 different plants a week. And when I set this up, I was like, oh, this is a piece of cake. I eat so many fruits and vegetables. But what I came to realize is that I really eat the same 15
Mm,
fruits and vegetables, that they're,
yeah.
again, the volume is there, but the
Right.
variety was significantly
Uh-huh.
lacking. So I thought that was a great challenge, So
I
I,
love it. I'm going to take that on, Amanda. That's
yeah,
wonderful. Thank
green,
you.
green broccoli, purple broccoli, green
Yes.
carrot, I mean, orange carrots, purple carrots. I mean, they're all
Right.
just giving you a different micronutrient load. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge.
That's great. That's great.
I love that. Well, where can people find you if they want to reach out and take a deep dive into their gut microbiome?
Yeah, you can find me at wellempowered.com. And if you come and check us out and you decide you want to look at working together, when you schedule a complimentary consultation, which you can do right there on that homepage, make sure you let me know where you found me because you will be gifted with 10% off for having been sent by Amanda. And then on Instagram, you can find me at Well Empowered.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all of her contact information in the caption notes, but it's been so good to talk to you. I think that this is such an important topic, as people continue to build their health and wellness. It's like steps, stepping stones
Mhm.
to optimize everything that's going on in your body. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been such a treat.